This is AE's Circle Up session, the 90s edition. And we have some really amazing folks tonight that are with us. So we're going to go ahead and dive in and let them introduce themselves and get to some questions. And we'll hopefully, have time for your questions and some more stories. And yeah, thank you all for being here. Tony, do you want to start us off with a little introduction about positions you've held in AE, number of years you've been involved in experiential education, and where you are now?
Oh my. All right. So Tony Alvarez, residing in Ann Arbor, Michigan right now. I in 1985, after having tried different sort of creative kinds of ventures on my own, I discovered through an MSW intern who was assigned to me, I discovered Project Adventure, and then through that, I discovered Carl Ronke, and then through that, I discovered AEE. And so starting in 85, I started to do some trainings, going to trainings and stuff to learn more about this. I had been doing experiential work for probably 7 or 8 years before that. I'm a social worker, and so I was doing clinical and school social work. And talk therapy wasn't going where I wanted it to go, and it just felt wrong for me. I was born and raised in the Philippines, and the idea of sort of asking people questions about their personal lives just did not resonate with me. And a relationship was key. And anyway, so those things just didn't work with the sort of the MSW sort of perspective. And so I heard from a mentor about experiential sort of work for middle management people in the business world, and she gave me 3 manuals by Pfeiffer and Jones, and I started reading those things, and I thought, what was she thinking? Why is she giving me these books about how to work with middle management? I worked with 2nd graders and 3rd graders with emotional and learning disabilities. What the heck, But anyway, I used my creativity and took 1 or 2 activities from there, and I practiced on that, and it was just like amazing. And so I did that for 6 or 7 years, and then the student came to join me in my school as an intern, and I said, just watch me for a minute and then we can talk, because I'm busy running a group. And I did a group, and when I got done, he said, oh, you do adventure? And I'm like, okay, tell me more. And he said, oh, I'm from North Carolina. We had Project Adventure over there, Outward Bound, and none of those resonated for me. I, grew up in the Philippines, so it's like, tell me more. And he said, I have Islands of Healing and, cobras and cows, Anyway, that's how I was introduced to adventure. And I found what I thought, at least in writing, my people. I went to my first national conference in Lake Junaluska in 1987 or 88, and just fell in love. I was just like, oh my gosh, right? So that was really cool. And in those days, there was not much therapy being talked about. Clearly all the work was therapeutic, but nothing about therapy. And I didn't really come into, I got into TAPG probably 90, 89, 90. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what year. And then that became like the place for me. And so I've been a member of TAPG since 90 or 91. And I was the chair of that committee for many years. I was the chair of the committee in the Heartland region. We had a strong, robust Heartland region. And I spent, I think, 7 or 8 years being the chair of that council. And I was anyway, did all these different things for AEE. But really sort of funneled my focus and interest in the work of the therapeutic work that was happening, and really wanting to sort of invite sort of the social work and the clinical psychologists and the counselor sort of perspective into the work that we're doing to make it more intentional. And so again, for the last 30 years, I've been, the chair of that, the coach to this, to that, just different components, whatever I can do to sort of help out and not be such a big blocking body in the room for people to grow and things. So that's been my experience with AEE. In my practice, I went from talk therapy to experiential work to adventure work, and by the time I got to the University of Michigan, where I was teaching graduate school, I was full-on adventure-based practitioner. All my teaching was experiential. All of my practices were experiential, and I tried to create a certificate program for adventure therapy through the University of Michigan, and the university legal counsel decided that that was too risky and at the time, and so they put a nix to that. And so I'm sort of glad that out of that work came CSAT, which is what's going on now with the clinical licensure or certification for adventure therapy. I love this practice. You know, my kids grew up in adventure. I have 3 kids. All 3 of them are facilitators. They're all experiential sort of workers. They all do justice work. Yeah, my company is Alvarez Consulting. It started off with me and Gary as consultants and doing facilitation. And after he retired, I took it on for myself. And then my 3 kids joined me. And so we were the 4 facilitators for this company. And then since then, they've all surpassed me. And I just sit back by the curb seeking handouts from them. Well, they do amazing work. So yeah, I think that's good.
Thanks, Tony.
Mm.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Michelle, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Michelle Cummings. Current day, I own and operate Training Wheels, which is a portable team building company. I train a lot of trainers. I'll do a lot of training of new facilitators. I still do corporate development work as well. And but I also work with teachers. Basically anybody that works together as a team, I do training for. And so not only do I do team development work internally at organizations, but I also do lots of train the trainer programs where I teach other people new team building games and things like that. And Training Wheels itself started in 1999, so the very tail end of the 90s. And so it's just been so fun to grow over the course of the last couple decades. But why I wanted to come in the 90s group and kind of speak here is that I feel like in the 90s, this was where I also discovered experiential education, as well as not only AEE, but that's where I just found that's where I found my professional home. So I actually graduated college in 93 and got my bachelor's degree in psychology, and I went into adventure therapy as well. So I worked at a wilderness camp for troubled kids that were making some pretty poor choices in the back home. And so they sent them out to this wilderness camp, and the average length of stay was 6 to 9 months for the kids. And it was the hardest work I've ever done, because it was 24/7 on with kids for long periods of time. Our work schedule was 120 hours on, 48 off, 120 on, 48 off. You were not guaranteed sleep in that 120 hours, right? So there was one particular week that was a pretty rough week. And I remember my co-counselors and we were awake 105 of those 120 hours. So that was a little rough week. But what I loved about that work is that's where we had an alpine tower. That's where I first got exposure to ropes courses and team building activities and things like that. And so what I loved about that is I saw rapid advancement in the kids, and their treatment plan and their progress towards working towards going home after we would do the experiential work. And so I was like, I want to learn more about why that stuff works so well and so rapidly. Like I got so much further with that. So that's after I was there a year and a half, and then I went to Mankato State. Well, at the time it was Mankato State University. Now it's Minnesota State University at Mankato. They changed the name of my university, but so then I got my master's degree in experiential education. Jasper Hunt was my advisor. And that was, I think, the most educational year of my entire life. Like I took every class that he offered. It was like I just was a sponge, and all the theory and all of that went behind the scenes with it, I was just thrilled with. It was so much fun to learn in that way, and just to learn why experiential just advances and works so well. So then I found my job from there is I also went to work at another facility that worked with kids, but half the month they did a 10-day intervention program for kids that were just starting to get into some trouble. So trying to head them off at the pass, if you will. So we did a 10-day program, then we had a week off, and then we did the next week or two, we would do corporate and community work. And so that's where I'm like, oh my gosh, adults can play these games too, right? Like this stuff isn't just reserved for kids. So anyway, so that was so that's kind of where I got my toes in the water with doing this work with adults as well. So, and through that process, I actually wrote a grant while I worked there to get another. Alpine Tower was the only really ropes course builder that I knew. So I just opened up my chat box. Ed, I see your note there. The camp I worked at down in Texas was called the Salesmanship Club Youth Camp, which is a strange name for a camp, a wilderness camp, but it was funded by the Salesmanship Club in Dallas, Texas. And so the Salesmanship Club, they are a philanthropic organization in Dallas, Texas that raise funds for different nonprofits. So they host the Byron Nelson Golf Tournament every year, and all the proceeds from that would go to fund camp. And it was like $25 million a year that they would donate. And so kids could go for free, or they were on a sliding scale or something like that. So, my co-counselor, which most people here on the call might know, is that's where Christine Norton and I met. We were co-counselors at that organization. So I have known Christine since my first job out of college. So we have been soul sisters since the start. And so it's been fun for both of us to have AEE be our professional home and continue on from there. So, yeah, and from there, I wrote a grant to get an Alpine Tower built at my facility that I was at. And through that, I got to know Joe Lackey and Mike Fischescher very, very well through that process. And so after my commitment was done there, they brought me on they were building so many towers at that point in time that they were like, we need someone that has experience with our particular ropes course, because so many people are building this, but they don't know what to do with them. And so they're like, we would love to send you like 3 months, 6 months at a time to go to these new facilities and help them build their course, write their staff manual, hire and train their staff, and start their marketing plan and walk them through their first, 3 to 6 months worth of clients, and then move to the next facility and do the same thing again. So I did that. That was so much fun for me. I was also single, so I didn't have any dependents, and I could just pick up and hop and move wherever I wanted to around the world, around the country. So that was really rewarding for me, and just get creative with marketing. How do we get people to come and experience, experiential education in this way? So so I did that several times, and the last place I did that was in Colorado. And the day I moved to Colorado was the day I met my husband. And so that Colorado has been home ever since 1998 is when I moved there. And so that last facility, I worked there for a year and got that program going. And then at that point, then we were engaged. And so I couldn't just pick up and move to wherever the next Alpine Tower course was. So at that point, I thought, okay, well, if I can't build a tower where people could come to me, maybe I could build a portable course and I can go to the people, and everything else could go out from there. So that's when Training Wheels was born in 1999. And I started with one product, one kit, and training. And now today we have over 350 different activities and books. And, so now I'm kind of a warehouse or an outlet where I acquire and sell books and things like that from many other people in the industry, several of them that I see familiar faces on this call as well. And it's just been a joy, a total joy. Like I have just loved creating new things and training and presenting workshops. My first AEE was in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, when I was in grad school at Mankato. And I remember showing up there. I'm like, oh my God, there are 1,000 people that know what rubber chickens are and know what to do with them. Like that was so fun for me to finally find my people and find other people. So I have been to every AEE since, and So again, this is my professional home. I've had, various involvement as far as like helping out with different regional conferences, and I was on crew one year, and I've presented most every year. There were a few years I probably didn't. Early in my career I didn't, but ever since I've had training wheels, I think I've presented every year at the international conference, and then also several of the regional conferences as well. So I love this organization. I love the people. I love the passion. I love learning by doing. And it's one of those that I can't imagine doing any other job. And it's one of those that I feel very blessed. I found it so early on in my career. And that, and I know that the ripple effect of this kind of work completely transforms and changes lives. So, and when you're in the business of making people better people, like there's just nothing more rewarding than that, I don't think. So, anyway, so that's a little bit about me, and I thank you so much. And I also I turned 50 this year, and so did AEE. So I'm like, okay, hey, that's a good 72 was a good year. Yeah.
Can hear you, Sherry.
Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. I see Binky joined us too. Binky, good to have you on. Awesome. Binky's hopefully going to be one of our panelists tonight also. But Rita, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, my name's Rita Yerkes. I'm probably one of the older people here. My journey started as a kid. I never really fit with what a girl was supposed to do. I was always out playing and got thrown out of Girl Scouts because I wanted to play and go camping, and they didn't want to do that for some reason. I kept at it, and I just like to learn by doing. And so I pursued that. I was training special ed students from the University of Tennessee when I was a high school sophomore to work with differently abled children. Did that for a couple of years, went on to my master's degree. I tried to combine physical education and special ed, and I was like, couldn't find a place where I could go do that. So I just sort of made my own way. Decided I'd go teach at colleges and universities and try to develop outdoor programs, because that was always a theme in my life. And landed at Towson State University with a guy named Craig Dopkin. And we were sort of misfits in that program, that people didn't understand why we wanted to do stuff in the outdoors with students. He went to Outward Bound, I went to Knowles, and then we kind of came back together and created a program that was considered a minor. We had more kids in that minor than they had in the majors. And it just took off from there. And went to my first AE conference in 81 in Montreal, or I think it was 80. And I did not feel very welcome there. There was like a bunch of guys everywhere and lots of climbers and the whole 9 yards. And they just didn't seem to be too welcoming for women for some reason. So I went to a men's and women's special interest group, and it was mostly women, and decided that I really liked the workshops and stuff, but I didn't quite like the environment that AE was presenting. So I decided, well, let's start meeting. And so a lot of women started meeting and feeling a safe space. So from there in 81 till 86, we created women's special interest group, then a women's professional group, and then they ran me for the board. When they ran me for the board, I was surprised because I actually got elected in 86. And then they added an extra guy to the board, because I don't know why, but they did. Served on the board. I had to print this out because I've done different positions for 20 years in AEE. So I was in the women's interest group from 81 to 86, and then on a board member from 86 to 90. Then in 90, I became the president, and then we lost our executive director. So then I was a volunteer interim executive director running AEE from my office in Chicago, and did that for almost a year while we searched for a new director. And then served as past president, was on the board, and then from there moved to the Accreditation Council, where I served about 10 years there, chaired the Accreditation Council, and also served as a reviewer and what have you. As president, I was president when we were examining whether or not we were going to do accreditation, and that's a story in itself. but I have to say that this group has always had a special place in my heart because of the tremendous programs and individuals that have worked in experiential education and the impact that we have on our world and how badly we continue to need that today. And so I would say that it's been my privilege to be involved with colleges and universities that turned out people like Sky Gray and Jose Gonzalez and, you know, some other folks. I'm sure I'm too many I could manage to remember. Sky might remember some. But I learned as much from them as they ever learned from me, and I continue to learn from them because they keep making wonderful contributions to the field. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it, and I'm so privileged to be with you this evening.
Thank you, Rita. Simon, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Lee Gillis calls me a recovering academic, and I kind of like the title. Recently, I've been relapsing into getting wrapped up in a bunch of research studies that other people are doing. So even though I've been retired now for about 5 years, it seems I'm still involved. I counted up 50 years in outdoor learning and about half of them with AEE. I was the student representative to the steering committee for the 1983 George Williams, later Lake Geneva campus. And I think I left in the mid 2000s from AEE. Two of the things I'm probably most proud of, you know, I've written stuff and sat on committees and chaired this and all sorts of things. Probably the things I'm most proud of is Dan Garvey made me the international ambassador. And when I traveled around, I recruited people to join AEE from outside the United States. And I think that made it a more global organization. And then the second thing is recently the CHIP project. If you haven't seen that, it's aee.org/CHIP, all lowercase. And it's just a bunch of people writing up summaries for public consumption about parts of what we do, and anyone's welcome to add to it. And yeah, that's about it.
Thanks, Simon. And yeah, check out the CHIP project if you haven't. It was an amazing effort by Simon to corral and gather all the folks who participated in it, and we really appreciate all that information is available to the public and to our members, and can be downloaded. So if you have questions about something, or you have participants who have questions, or you're trying to convince your administrators to support your program, there's all kinds of information there cited with research to help you out. So,
and he definitely had to corral. So he did a very good job. He had to corral how many facilitators to try to get this project done? So Simon was an excellent.
Yeah, I think there's like 4 dozen plus, maybe 50 people.
Yeah, 50 facilitators. It's not just participants. He had to wrangle 50 facilitators. So hands down, that was some work right there. Thank you, Simon.
Yep, no worries.
Doesn't everything involving AEE have something to do with corralling, though? Like, I mean, let's be honest here.
Yes, I would say yes, Becky. And Becky, do you want to introduce yourself? We're just doing, you know, what happened along your experiential education journey, how you got involved with AEE, anything you'd like to share, and where you are now.
Well, I am in my office right now in Little Rock, Arkansas, where it is 100 degrees outside, and we have been programming all summer long in high heat, high humidity. Oh my goodness. But it's amazing because our campers are still happy and still enjoying things. And I've got a little kind of sick one in there, so I may have to go see what's going on with him. But I've been at the Pfeiffer camp for 38 years, I guess. I started here as a camp counselor in the summer. Sanford was the director at the time, and still is. And eventually married him, and we've worked together pretty much that whole time. I'm sorry, I'm wiped out too because I did swim lessons today in the 100-degree temperature. But AEE, yeah. So my first AEE conference was St. Paul in 1990. My favorite thing from that conference was Xperia Day. I loved that. And we've modeled that for a lot of our programs that we do when we take kids on field trips. You know, they're more than just like a field trip. They're experiential. So I really enjoyed that. I was also kind of taken aback by it. Like, you know, AE people are a little overwhelming at times, but still to this day. But you know, we kept going back to international conferences for many, many years. And then our daughters would go with us. That was always so much fun. In fact, they're both, I'm going to try to get both of them back to the 50th. One of them is 21 and one of them is 24. So, and they're both kind of doing, well, one of them is definitely doing some experiential stuff. Oh, look what you've got. Oh my gosh. I see. We can't hear you, Sherry, but I see that picture.
I'm pretty sure that's your girls.
That is, yeah.
That's
That's
Stanford.
Sure is. So yeah, so you know, they did the name tags and stuff for several years. And it just, hang on just one second. What's going on? Yes, you may. Go to the one right here. Right through that door. Yeah, in the hallway, go to the left, right there. Yeah. Oh, y'all, this little fella. Oh my goodness, he has had such a hard life. And I talked to his mom yesterday and just was telling me all the things that he's been through, and just 10 years old, wants to go home, but he's now acclimated, and this is what keeps me coming. This is what drives me, you know, love this little fella. Even though he's hard to deal with, and it's like, it's 100 degrees. Can we just get along? But anyway, yeah, AEE is great. My favorite roles, I think, have been when we've hosted regional conferences at the camp. I've loved that. I got to host the international conference in Little Rock. So much fun. I loved that. And just participating, and it's so fun to see all your familiar faces. I just try to call Sanford to tell him to get on, but well, I mean, I'd have to help him get on, right? Let's be honest. But but anyway, I don't know how many of you are going to AEE in the fall, but good. So hope to see you all there. And Simon, thank you once again. Simon did some research for us, used some of our data, and put together a wonderful workshop. And I have reviewed it, Simon, but I'm waiting on Sanford too. And I'm also waiting on Sanford to help me finish the AEE statement of diversity for the NINA project. So anyway, that's where we are. And I'm gonna have to bow out for just 1 second to go see what's going on.
And while she's bowing out, I'll just add that the findings for the study were remarkable. They've been doing this for 33 years. They gave me 24 years of data. I subjected it to a meta-analysis that shows consistently over 3,000 children for 1 month of programming increase several months in their spelling, their math, their reading ability. All of these kids at risk academically, their self-esteem, all of that goes up. And these guys have been doing it for 33 years, and the evidence is overwhelmingly irrefutable. So an impressive program, and I'm sorry she's not here to hear that said about her, but they've both done an amazing job.
That's awesome. Thank you, Simon. And a little bit on that note, what do you think, and anybody can answer this, what do you think were the major accomplishments for experiential education and AEE during the 90s? Rita, go ahead.
I would have to say a couple things. One is working on inclusion, which we continue to work on to this day. And there was a tremendous effort made by the Women's Professional Group that was sort of pushing the board, but then the board did get on board, so to speak, and really tried to work on this, although we still have many challenges to do today, and I think we're continuing to try. The other thing is accreditation. I was president at the time that we called a task force to look at the possibility. We were 100,000 or more in debt. We brought in a consultant that does this kind of thing, and gave the board the message that there's no way that we could afford to do this. And so after a day of this, hearing from this consultant, I go, well, okay, I think we need to have a motion here. And it's typical AEE people, everybody voted to go for it. And it was a struggle. It was a real struggle, not only putting in the standards and getting the standards together, but also convincing our own members that it was important to do. And then what we saw happening was other organizations copying our standards and not going through accreditation, but using them as the standards in the field for experiential learning, adventure education. So that was pretty monumental achievement, but it took a lot of hands on deck and a lot of practitioners helping. And then research was the other peer, I think, of really saying, we need to know that what we say we're doing, we can show we're doing it. And Simon was a leader in that regard. Mike Gass came on strong. Lots of university people were doing studies with their graduate students and that kind of thing. And then the publications, the journal, and getting women published, before it was just, I'm sorry, all the guys were getting published, but none of the women were getting published. And I have to give Peggy Walker Stevens and Betsy Donglesh, two of the earliest women who worked with the board, as sort of catalysts to help people get published. And then we started getting people on editorial committees and actually guest editing and that kind of thing. And so I think just getting our message out to a broader audience as well.
I'll piggyback that a little bit, is that for me, I was, because I was younger in the 90s, that was my very beginning of my professional career. And because of women like you, Rita, and Denise Mitten, and, for me, when I entered, I never had that same feeling that you did from I always felt welcome. And I always felt like I had women role models that were there. And for me, I instantly saw a place where I could be also looked at. I aspired to be like you all at one point, in my career, because I'm like, this is a place where women are actually recognized and welcome. And so now I will say, when I started Training Wheels, I did experience some backlash, because I felt like at the time I was one of the only female business owners at that point in time. And I got some pushback from some organizations and some male members of the community that were like, we don't need that. We don't need what you do, because it's already in the industry. And there's not space for more where we can just, so anyway, so I experienced that a little bit, which just basically made me put my britches on a little bit tighter. And I was like, oh yeah, we'll watch this. But for me, finding a professional home where I had role models like you all was really instrumental in me. I wanted to be like you. I wanted to be like that. And that was deeply seated in me. So that was a great example that I have. So thank you for your early work to pave the way for people like me, that now, again, the ripple effect from your early work was so needed for people like me.
In addition to, may I piggyback on that too? For me, the 90s, at least two things jump out at me. And one is that the regulatory function of AEE sort of kicked in more intensely. And so whether it was with the women and the groups and trying to make put a hold on that, but also with the NALA group, right? Those of us who were people of color who were showing up and feeling sort of just like being very isolated. So, but also in terms of TAPG was kicking up a storm, thinking about professionalizing and what does that look like, and who should be a therapist or an adventure, whatever, all the language. So there was a lot of tightening up. And again, I remember very much a lot of time with you there, Simon, in those years in the late 80s, early 90s of much of these conversations. So I sort of felt like the 90s was when we regulated more. I think what we lost from that process of the regulatory process was also the sort of the the amazing guides, had river guides and wilderness folks who had no degrees but had amazing skills at guiding and being with people. And those folks who more and more, as they listen to this, the regulatory, oh, we need to have this degree and that degree, that there wasn't a box that accommodated them so much. That was a feeling I was experiencing with within the association. But also remember very clearly, might have been 95, West Virginia or somewhere, we had our AE conference down there somewhere, when I remember during the big members meeting, Christiane Teen at the time sort of made an announcement, hey, at the end of this meeting, if you're a social worker, meet at the bar, you know, like that, right, to have a conversation. And I think there were 6 social workers who showed up at this gathering, and I was there, and I brought with me 3 student interns, you know, MSW students. And then Christiane was there, and I don't remember, there were 2 or 3 other people, but it was a small group. And I thought, wow, we don't have enough, you know, social workers in the room here. And this is such a good place for social work, right? I won't even attempt to ask that question in the AEEs of the last 10 years. There's just, there won't be a room to hold the number of sort of social workers and licensed counselors and clinical psychologists who are sort of part and parcel to what AEE is. So I think we've that group of folks also sort of, you know, jumped on board into the mix. Also, final comment, it was also in the 90s when we had the likes of, well, Lee and Mark Ames and Kim Wasserberger, and I happened to be part of that, doing our funny, I have it here, it's on my next to my desk. We provided several of these. It's the relationship, stupid. And we had these workshops that Lee and Mark and Kim and Keith Russell and we would do these workshops on speedy rapport. You know, we'd get our participants into the room, and then we'd send them out into the whatever city we were in. We just tell them, go and build rapport with anybody and tape record all your work and see what happens. And I just thought we could do those things, you know, and like there was just that energy and that wonderfulness, the quirkiness that, you know, that you also referenced, Rita, but, you know, in and out of that, right? So anyway, I thought we grew a lot in the 90s.
And I'd like to add an analysis of part of what Tony was saying. I think prior to the 90s, we had just recognized that reflection, facilitation, metaphor were all important parts of the puzzle. And it was in the 90s that we started to develop those. And I believe the focus on the psychology and educational components drove away the recreationally focused people.
Yep.
They formed a separate organization, as did the ropes course construction people, because the organization could not be all things to all people.
Yep.
And as organizations evolve, I think that's pretty typical. There's often offshoots of them. The other thing that I think is important to recall back in the 90s was several deaths in the adventure therapy related fields. They may not have been adventure therapy as we would define it today, but they claimed to be. And as a result, it was necessary to form sub-organizations like Outdoor Behavioral Healthcare and TAPG's ethics statements. That was a remarkable step forward for the profession, to be able to separate ourselves from the folks that were killing people. And we also need to remember that at that time, Britain had gone through the Lyme Bay tragedy. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but it led to the world's first, at least that I'm aware of, criminal negligence trial in the courts. And we avoided that in the United States with the Mount Hood tragedy because it was a religious school. The parents bought into the model. and nobody decided to sue or even bring criminal charges. But I think every nation goes through that, and it's part of the evolution. And I think those things were weighing heavily on the organization at the time. So yeah, that's I just wanted to add those pieces to the mix.
Thank you.
Just to dovetail on that, Simon, there was also a crisis around insurance coverage as it was all of that in the 90s. That was pretty significant.
Yeah, I think that was the late 80s, early 90s, as I recall. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was also when folks like Reb Gray, I think, came to the forefront to try and analyze these things and help organizations with risk management in a way that was healthy and also very consistent with legal precedent at the time.
And I think Reb and Betty Vandersonson teamed together and actually did, workshops at AEE and really helped with developing risk management standards because of their work in the law field.
Right. And then both of them served on the accreditation council when I was a director of accreditation and Rita was on the council. So they were definitely influential and they were a great team. Lots of shared mutual respect there.
And I think it was this work within the organization of collaboration around risk management program accreditation that was really a gift that the association gave to the world, because I see other countries struggling with these same things now and trying to follow. They recognize that certifying leaders doesn't ensure safety because it's a much broader perspective. So they look to what AEE has been doing, and it's created an amazing standard, all the hard work that was done in those days.
Mm-hmm.
I think also the sense of community in tragedy. I remember Deba Jongo's first day on the job at the University of Alaska was a major mountaineering accident that happened. And she really was confronted from day one. She was on another course and a helicopter came in to get her, to take her back to the site of the tragedy. And students lost their life that day. And I remember Judd Williamson and other people on the accreditation council, she called and we just mounted tremendous support for her in the program and also the victims and what have you. And out of that, I think she wrote a book about her experience, but it also informed informed a lot of the standards as we continued to revise them.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember the year, but when Craig had his accident, what was that, in the middle 90s?
I think so, yeah. And
It was,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
It was
Wisconsin.
it was right before the Lake Geneva conference.
Yeah.
Like
Wisconsin.
it was a couple weeks before then, because I remember I had not met Craig, but there was so much buzz about it at the conference that year. I was like, who is this guy, right?
Yeah.
So
I just remember when that happened because there was such a somber sort of affect in the conference with groups of folks, and I think it made me. It might have been the first time that I thought, oh, this is like for some people this is family, that there's this connection, and that whether you knew Craig or not, but you knew the experience, right, and what was going on and stuff. And it was, I think, also the 90s was when Play for Peace got organized, right, as a subjunct of that, Mike and
Michael Terrian.
Michael Terrian.
Yeah, Terrian.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michael. Yeah, I think that was the 90s.
yeah. So Tony, to piggyback on something you said, the NALA group also, I remember I helped with the first conference that was held at the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota with Lemoyne, LaPointe and whatnot. And I remember going and staying there on the reservation, and people flew in from all over to go to this conference. And it was a beautiful gathering of people. And so I helped out on with that first conference and then subsequent ones that were at Rosebud from then on. But it was That was such a, for me, that was also, I grew up in rural Kansas where there was not a lot of diversity. And, when I was a kid, I told I begged my parents to send me to every camp that they could afford or that we could do. I even fundraised my own so I could go to camp, because that's where I actually got to finally experience diversity, was at camp. And, so for me then to have that, to really start welcoming that and celebrating that in AEE, that was a fun process for me, and just the richness that I think adds to AEE when we can be more inclusive and create a space for people to feel safe, to share, to feel welcome, and that was rewarding for me.
Thank you all. Next question. What have you seen come to fruition? And a little bit was answered in the last question, but what were your hopes for experiential education during that time, and what have you seen come to fruition as of now?
I'd like to get on a soapbox for a second. I think it's called the curse of the black box phenomenon. We have not identified how and why what we do works. In the 90s, we had an idea that it involved reflection on practice, tries, or mastery attempts to overcome dissonance. We knew metaphor was important. We knew all of these components, but we never really got around to figuring it out. And because of that, we couldn't express how we were special or powerful. We knew we were, we just couldn't communicate it. And because we couldn't communicate it, education and psychology and other existing professions marginalized us. They pushed us off to the edge, and we didn't get our place at the table. And I think that continues today because we haven't properly addressed our mechanisms of change, the so-called black box, that something good happens between flipping the switch for input and the light coming on for output, but we have no idea what happens in between. And I think the second thing that it's impacted us on negatively is that because we haven't been able to establish ourselves, because we've been marginalized, our language has been usurped by others. The term experiential is now about marketing. It's now about internships, which are all related, but it's not what it initially was with our movement. And even the term adventure learning. Nowadays, the general public understands adventure learning as passively observing online an expedition with school kids using possibly VR or augmented reality. That's adventure learning in the schools now because of online as a modality. So we lose our language, which further disempowers us as an association. So my soapbox is we need to sort out that curse. We need to figure out exactly how the black box works. And we know part of that, but that research needs to be finished by somebody. I'll shut up and get off the box.
So to counter Simon's box, if we look historically at the development of experiential education, we have to go way, way back. And if you look at the early 1900s, people were doing experiential education before any of us were. And they, I think we all strive to have a field that we identify with. And if you stop and ask people, okay, what's your major job? A lot of them will say, well, it's social work, or it's education, or it's I'm in business for myself. Very few of them say, I'm in the experiential education field, because then you have to explain it for 20 minutes. What is that? And I guess I have to come back to, so many different folks use our methodology and claim it as their own. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because it is being impacted on society. However, when you're trying to establish your field, it feels like a bad thing. So I don't know. I go back to, before there was social work, before there was recreation, before there was physical education, because if you look at the development of those fields, they will claim the same thing. We've been marginalized, and yet other people find ways to utilize what they do in what they're doing. So I don't know what the answer is, Simon. I agree with you that, we haven't been able to necessarily show the connection and do it with a research model, but every one of us know it works.
Yeah, I fully agree with you.
Because we've seen it.
I think previously marginalized disciplines like physical education, like recreational leisure studies, have gotten around to figuring out their black box philosophically and practically. We have not. And in many ways, we lost the plot on that. We just gave up, and that troubles me.
So Simon, I'm curious, would like ROI studies and things like that, is that where you're feeling where we're lacking, where we don't have like good data to give out to people? Is that what would that be helpful, or is it more research based where because I know we had, Dale's cone of experience, Dale, I forget his last name, with the, when he was like, you retain 10% of what you hear, 20% of what you see, and
the cone thing.
Dale's cone of Dale. What is Dale's last name? I can't think of it off the top of my head. It's 70% of what you do. Like that. Those percentages. I felt like that work was trying to do. I think what you're describing here.
No, that's different. And in some respects, those percentages were guesstimates. There was no research behind them.
Okay, that's good.
What I'm suggesting is we need to understand the mechanism of change. I believe I have an idea of what that is and how it occurs, and the various things that occur in that. Someone else may have some other ideas. We need to test this, and then we need to figure out whether or not it can be adjusted for dosage. So I want to get this change in a client. So how much risk taking, how much conflict resolution, how much exercise, how much nature immersion is necessary to get that result? And if we can do that, we can show that not only do we understand how and why it works, but we can also control it the same way a physician would control a prescription. Now, we may never get there because it's a difficult thing to study, but we've at least got to get some evidence to do that. Right now, it's a good feeling. And I don't think that's enough to be taken seriously outside of our own influence.
I think it's a tall order that you're talking about for sure. And to me, it kind of goes back to just to be a successful experiential educator or experiential anything. I've got to go again.
Bye. I sort of wanted to again add to that conversation that as I've gotten older and in my, I don't know, 5th year or 4th year of retirement, supposedly, and I think about when I think about the work that we do, we're doing it in a context. So whether you're a clinician one-on-one or you're doing a large group or whatever, it's a context, and that in that context, the common denominator is the facilitator or the therapist or the guide. And I don't know, maybe as a field, we don't want to say it's all about the guide. If you go to a workshop that, Michelle is running, it's going to be good because it's Michelle. But if she gave her agenda to, somebody else, it's not going to be Michelle's workshop. It's going to be that's other person's energy and affectation is going to show up. I don't know how many times over the years I've heard from time and time again. It's sort of like, you just can't, you can't be Mike Gass, or you just can't be Tony Alvarez, or you just can't be Michelle. And it's like, well, I certainly don't want you to be me, but I'm an important part of the box by which this work is happening. And I don't know that I'm afraid, because I talked to the current researchers in AEE and to put all that energy on the person in the room takes away the power of EE. But I don't think it does. I just think it complements it, and that there's certain facilitators that bring a certain thing into the room that really enhances the experience for the clients. And you know, when those folks are much more alert and aware and are doing a good job of assessing and matching their actions with sort of the people that are in the room, and they use proper pronouns when asked, and they don't disregard the females in the room, right? When people pay attention and do good work, it creates amazing things in the box.
Yeah, it's I think the facilitator, their techniques, their style are all part of that black box. Absolutely. But that's not all there is to it. You need someone who can affect all of those things. Yeah.
Right.
Binky, you were cut off, I think, by another toilet visit. What were you going to say?
Sadly, that is so true. Yeah. Go home, unfortunately. Pretty much what Tony said is what I was going to say, that it's really, it's kind of all about the person and being able to pull it off. I mean, you can have the nuts and bolts, but you've got to be able to deliver it in such a way that, and be in tune with the moment in such a way that is so hard to teach. And I think the only way to really teach that is to model it. That's what we found at the camp. I mean, that seems to be our best counselors are the ones that, you know, have grown up with it and have seen it modeled.
Yeah.
And lots and lots of reflection, you know, figuring out what's the best. Why did that work? Did that work? You know, so much of that. And, you know,
I think you know, ACA, American Camping Association, has done a 5-year study on does camp make a difference in the life of a child, and they have really done an amazing amount of work with their camps and what have you. So I'd invite you to go to their website. It's acacamps.org, and just look at their research and just see what they developed over time. I think our strength is our methodology that is shared by so many different gifted folks that are members of our association. And we will continue to struggle with this as long as we have kindred spirits like the people on this call and beyond, who believe in learn by doing and letting the learner set their pace and discover the world around them. And I just have to say thank you to everybody on this panel tonight. And I'm so looking forward to the 50th conference, because there are so many people that I owe a debt of gratitude who've helped shape my career and also given me ideas to try, and also been support people there when I needed somebody to call and talk about a different challenge or whatever. So I don't know if we're where we are in time, Sherry, but
Rita, that was perfect, actually. that was a great end to our conversation, which is amazing, and thank you all so much. It's again, I feel super lucky to sit in this space and learn from you all and hear the amazing things that are happening in your lives and what you've experienced over the course of AE's life. So thank you all. Conference is November 10th through the 13th in Black Mountain, North Carolina. Lots of good things happening there. We have so many people volunteering their time and their space and their knowledge. We had an amazing record number of workshop proposals in, or trying to get as many of those in as possible. So yeah, just really great stuff happening. Registration for that will open tomorrow, so check that out. And yeah, thank you all for being here. Again, thanks to our panelists for being part of this and for continuing to be part of AEE and for all the work you've done over the years. It's really amazing to hear about and learn about. I really appreciate it. And we will have the aughts, the 2000s next month. So we hope you all join us then for that one. And we're creeping up on the present day and hoping that'll bring us to the conference. So thank you all very much. Have a great night.
Thank you, everybody. Such a great discussion. It's great seeing everyone.
Michelle, have a safe flight home.
Thank you. Yes.
Mabuhay.
Mabuhay. Yes.